Um, so, so it's good to see everybody. It's been quite a week, just a little bit over a week since we've all learned a lot about COVID-19 and what's been going on. Um, Last week it was kind of personal for me because Jennifer and I had gotten a text on Sunday morning that one of her friends had been diagnosed with COVID-19. So we knew that we were actually going to. For what it's worth, we're both fine. We're doing very well. She is recovering. Her Jennifer's friend is recovering, and her husband tested positive, but so far he's okay as well. So everybody's doing all right that way. But at that point, it was fairly personal for me and sort of starting to become social. At this point, it's very social. Like the whole society is being affected by it. Last Saturday, I was talking with friends about it, and we were commenting that we'd been to Paris together and talking about how the cafes in Paris had closed, and how dramatic that was. Of course, now we get to today, and restaurants in Shreveport are closed, and everywhere else we're in the same position. It seems so unthinkable just a week ago that we're actually going to be in this kind of position. I don't know about you, but I've spent the whole week with very little social contact, except for my wife. We've gone to the dog park a couple of times since it's outside and there's some space, so we did that. But other than that, I haven't actually seen people, which is a little strange to have done that way. So that unfolded very quickly. Quarantine, social distancing, all of that stuff. I mean, hard to believe it's been basically a week, a little bit more than a week that we've been dealing with this. Um, I called this the long haul because earlier in the week, a study came out or was released from the Imperial College of London that looked at how the COVID-19 is going to spread to different areas and different things. And their projections were really sobering. They said that we've got to do, right, they had three levels of stuff you could do: nothing, and then there was like suppression, and then there was one higher level. And basically you had to do the highest level. You had to break up all social contact in order to have a chance to keep it within the capacity of our hospitals to be able to deal with. And they said you had to do that for 2 weeks. But then if you let up, you could let up for 2 weeks, and then it would come right back. So you didn't have to go back for 2 weeks. And then you could let up for 2 weeks and back. That's basically what their model would allow. So we needed to do the most extreme thing, and we need to do it until COVID-19 is in hand, until it's dealt with. Which meant they were saying they were looking at 18 months of having to deal with this. And I thought, wow, that is a long time. There's a little bit of doubt about it. If COVID-19 turns out to be seasonal, the way that the flu is, we might get a break here. Flu season is coming to an end. We're getting to the end of when you typically start to see flu. So maybe COVID-19 will let up for us. The Southern Hemisphere is not going to get so lucky to be able to do that. But even if it does, when the season returns again in the fall, we're going to have to go back to this. So this has become quite normal for us. This is going to have to be normal for us for a long time. And that, to me, was really intimidating. To point to other things that happened this week that we're dealing with, of course, the stock market crash has been one of the most dramatic in history. I mean, a couple of days have been up there in the top 5 biggest crashes ever, in terms of percentages, not just in terms of total amount, because that changes, but in terms of percentages, it's been some of the biggest drops. And that's hard for people that are counting on 401ks, right, for retirement. But it's also hard when people are thinking about their jobs and everything else. Like, what is that going to mean for all different kinds of employment and all of that kind of thing? So we're seeing dramatic, huge changes. We're feeling locked in, right, isolated. I think everybody feels quite vulnerable at this point. And it's times like that, right, that humanism can seem inadequate. It's times like that humanism can seem difficult. Sticking with just the human, talking only about the human, means that you don't get to appeal to any kind of metaphysical guarantee that everything's going to work out for the best. the classic statement of that argument comes from Leibniz, right? He argues that this is the best of all possible worlds, right? Because an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good God exists, we can know that if there was any way to improve the world, right, God would have done it. That's the argument that Leibniz makes, right? If there was any way to make the world better, God would have done it. So Leibniz assures us that this is the best of all possible worlds, and that gives you a sort of guarantees, like things will work out. It's not clear how, it's not clear in what way, but because you have belief in this higher power, in this thing that goes beyond the human, that you can know that things will work out for the best. And humanism can't offer that kind of comfort. But I'm not sure, for me, how comfortable that argument is, or how much comfort that argument can really give you. When I think about saying that this is the best of all possible worlds, right, the criticism of Leibniz came from Voltaire, responding, looking at his world and the suffering that was in it, and just ridiculing the idea that what we're seeing out there could be the best thing that an all-knowing, all-good, all-powerful God could have created. Whatever sense of best Leibniz has to be using there, it can't be the ordinary sense that we typically use it in. It can't be that everything's going to be okay by what we usually mean by that, right? It's got to have some, again, metaphysical twist, right? You can save it if it's best in some other world or in some other strange way. Looking at the world as it is, it's very tough to take comfort in that. And that's really where we want that kind of comfort. All right. So I was talking about us feeling isolated and lonely, but some people have a different reaction. You probably had this reaction at some point over the week. It's also kind of exciting to see everything change. It also tends to make you feel a little more awake and a little more alive and a little more connected to things that are important. So why does that happen when all of a sudden, like, the world gets shaken like this? Why does that something that occurs? The fear that we were talking about before comes from a certain place, right? You're going to feel afraid when something precious is threatened, right? When something precious can be lost. So if there was, in fact, a metaphysical guarantee, right, nothing bad could happen, well, then there would never be anything to be afraid of. There would never be any reason to have any fear. Which means we wouldn't get connected to seeing the value, right? When the fear comes in because we recognize something of value that is in there. And it calls on us to do something, right? We need to care for this world. We need to care for the things that are in front of us, because if we don't, it can be lost. Lots of jokes out there about, what's being demanded of us at this point, stay home, sit on the couch, right? That's the need that we've got at this point. But that's true, right? I mean, when we're doing the social distancing, when we're thinking about going out as little as possible and contacting people as little as possible and washing our hands and all of that stuff, it goes beyond ourselves to caring for a world that could be lost, right? I mean, we could fail to be able to take care of the people around us. And that's one of the things that makes it important that we try to do that. It helps get us past that. So that risk is important, right? Because it highlights something that we can lose. Or maybe, I mean, if you think about the bigger picture, something that we will lose, right? Sooner or later, right? It will happen that things will get lost, that things will get damaged. There's no guarantee, right? We talk about protecting people's lives. Well, sooner or later they will die. The goal is to not have it be sooner, to try to deal with these things in this way. So the fear is important. I think one of the reasons it can make you feel alive if you manage it is because it connects you up with the risks and with what's important out there. Think about it that way, rather than looking for a metaphysical guarantee. If we think about it that way, then the problem that it gives us, right, is how can we be connected and care about the world without being overwhelmed by it, right? When you see the numbers come in, the reports, particularly the ones out of Italy recently, and the hundreds of people that have died, it's just overwhelming. You can't imagine it. You can't deal with it. You can't think of who these people are. It's too much, right? You can't care about it that way. There's a tendency now to get to inundate yourself with the news, right? To just listen constantly and think about this constantly. And that just burns you out, right? You can't do it. But by the same approach, it's not going to help to just disconnect. I'm going to point to a couple of things. We've actually talked about them before, but I think they're useful. Right now, I think has been a time that's been very helpful to remember the Stoic idea of the dichotomy of control, right? There are things that are within our control and things that are not within our control. Again, simple, basic idea, really obvious, but it's something that we often forget in moments like this, right? And when you get worried and stressed and you look at like the great big numbers, you think, oh, that's terrible. Well, that's not within my control. I can't change all of those numbers. What I can do is wash my hands, right? Take care of the people close to me, take care of the stuff in my area. I can't take care of those big numbers, right? Notice things are within my control, they're not within my control. I can try to handle this well, right? I can limit my social contact. I can find different ways of getting connected. I can do those kinds of things. Will that stop this virus? I can't control that, right? That's out of my control. So that helps us limit, right? That helps us limit. And that makes it a little more comfortable for us to go then beyond ourselves. That is to think about several of us doing this, many of us doing this. And that transcendence, I think, is what, it's what drives the metaphysical desire, right? The desire to go in that direction. You want that transcendence that goes beyond yourself to get a bigger picture. So I think that's an important combination, right? You've got to go back and forth between focusing on what you can control, what's within your control, and then getting out, right, beyond yourself and caring about those things beyond yourself. Something else that this time offers us is a sort of reset of our priorities and our habits. I think that's another reason it might be kind of exciting, right? It's a reset of our priorities and our habits. I think of it like the closet or sometimes room that every one of us has, right? That's full of junk that you haven't organized. Like, I'm going to deal with this someday, and you just keep shoving it in there. Well, this is in a way what your habits in life become, right? Is like you got little ones here and there, and you deal with each little thing, but it's a mess, and you haven't organized it, and you haven't thought about it. And now when something like this happens and bam, everything that I used to do gets shut down, everything's got to change, everything's got to reorganize. That's an opportunity for me to do it in a very deliberate way, to think carefully about which habits were good and helpful and that I need to reproduce, and which ones were distractions that were pulling me away from things that are important. Something I would want to think about here comes from Epicurus and Epicureans. They distinguish between what they call necessary pleasures and unnecessary pleasures. The necessary ones are the food, the water, the things that you need to survive, and the pleasure that you take from that. They think that's good. The unnecessary pleasures, it's not that they're bad, it's that they're dangerous. They're dangerous for a couple of reasons. One, they tend not to have an upper limit. And two, you tend to start to worry about them in ways that make them more important than they are, or make them seem more important than they are. I think that's something that has come up a lot when we think about how we're functioning. When we break up the world and our habits, and like, oh, you can't go to the grocery store and you can't get all of the things that you want, and it like on command, you can't get each little thing that you've needed before. Most of the time, that's okay, because most of those were unnecessary pleasures, right? Things that weren't needed for you to have it. You have food, water, and shelter. You have the basic things that you need to survive. And those, at least right now, are fairly stable and where you need them to be. The unnecessary pleasures are now getting disrupted. And that's where I think we're feeling a lot of our pain. So good, we can reset, right? We don't have to think of those as evil, but we can say, well, which one of those are really worth it? Which one of those things that I had been taking on and worrying about and dealing with were worth the time and trouble and effort that I had put into them? we're going to have to think like this, right, to get through the long haul. That is, there's going to be 18 months of us needing to continue to function like this one way or another. It probably isn't going to go away soon, right? If it does, it'll come back. We need to learn to care for each other in a sustainable, stable way. And at least those are two things that I would point to say that. So while I'm not sure humanists can say what's working out here is for the best, I think we can say that there is something good that we can do with this, right? We can take advantage of this opportunity to reset our habits, to focus on what is within our control, and think about how we deliberately try to care for things that we may not be able to control entirely, without worrying, without stressing, without unproductive, right, fretting. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say for today. That's what I wanted to talk about. So thank you. All right.